Hey guys, tonight we're time traveling to a Halloween that smells like boiled turnips and probably ends with someone getting whacked with a wooden spoon. That's right, Halloween in the 1800s. Not Instagram pumpkins, not your neighbor's questionable costume. We're talking real, actual people. Soot-stained, slightly tipsy, and extremely superstitious, staggering through a night when the scariest thing you might see is your uncle's home dentistry attempt. So before you settle in, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. Leave a comment telling me where you are listening from and what time it is for you. Now, dim the lights, switch on a fan for that white noise, and get as comfortable as possible. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what Halloween was really like in the 1800s? Did people actually carve pumpkins? Or did they just stare meaningfully at root vegetables until they felt festive? Did kids go trick-or-treating, or did they just pester local blacksmiths for a spare horseshoe and call it a night? Was there apple bobbing? Or was it more like dunk your face in something vaguely clean and hope for the best? Did people fear ghosts, or just the neighbor's homemade punch? Would you last a night wearing woolen underwear, playing fortune-telling games with cabbage, and dodging tipsy relatives wielding hot pokers? Would you survive a séance with your great-aunt Edna, who swears she's part witch on her mother's side? Would you make it through a night with no candy, no costumes from Amazon, and the looming fear of being roped into a parlor game involving actual livestock? Congratulations. You've just woken up on October 31st, somewhere between 1800 and 1899, in a house with questionable plumbing and even more questionable traditions. The air is thick with coal smoke, gossip, and the distant sound of someone trying to summon the dead with a frying pan. Good luck. You open your eyes to a bedroom colder than a banker's heart. There's no central heating, just a vague hope that someone remembered to light the fire last night. You can see your breath, you can smell yesterday's cabbage, and you immediately regret whatever you're about to step into on the floor. Welcome to Halloween morning, 1800s style. Let's set the scene. Your bed is a lumpy mattress stuffed with whatever straw or horsehair could be found last harvest, now compressed to the density of a brick and home to at least one mouse with no respect for privacy. The blanket, heavy as your existential dread, is a single scratchy wool rectangle that smells like a combination of mildew, wood smoke, and the ghost of laundry days long past. As you shift, the mattress emits a noise like a dying accordion, and you briefly wonder if you're the first person in history to pull a hamstring before breakfast. The window, if you have one, is a single pane of wavy, hand-blown glass, frosted by the cold and coated with enough condensation to start a mushroom farm. Sunlight struggles to squeeze through, landing in weak streaks across the warped floorboards, boards that are cold, creaky, and suspiciously sticky in places best left unexamined. Somewhere beneath your bed is a chamber pot, also cold, full, and not a morning highlight. If you're really lucky, nobody spilled it during last night's attempt to navigate by candlelight. If you're unlucky, well, you'll know soon enough. Getting out of bed is an extreme sport. Your feet hit the floor, and you're instantly reminded that socks in the 1800s means rag strips wrapped around your ankles and held together by hope. Your toes, numb and slightly judgmental, peek out through holes in your only pair of shoes. The floorboards are freezing, so you do that weird, hunched, tiptoe shuffle, the one that's meant to keep your feet off the ground as much as possible, but really just makes you look like you're walking across a field of emotional trauma. The fire in the grate is nothing but a few sulky embers and a mountain of grey ash. If you want warmth, you're going to have to work for it, splitting logs outside in the brisk morning air, which is exactly as fun as it sounds. Every swing of the axe is a gamble. Will you hit the wood? Or will you throw your back out and spend the rest of the day lying on the parlor floor like a Victorian fainting heroine? The rest of the household is waking up too, coughing, shuffling, and muttering curses at the cold. If you're part of a big family, there's a good chance someone already stole your best shawl in the night. Or maybe just your dignity. You hear your mother or aunt in the kitchen, already clanging pots and trying to convince the wood stove to cooperate. The air smells like last night's boiled vegetables, faint coal smoke, and the unmistakable whiff of damp wool. Halloween or not, the only thing truly spooky this morning is the prospect of communal bath day. Outside, a weak sun rises over a yard littered with frost and the remnants of last night's mischief. Maybe someone left a cabbage on the gatepost, an omen, or just the 1800s version of TPing someone's house. Chickens complain in the yard, their feathers puffed up like angry marshmallows. The neighbor's dog, who's been sleeping under your porch, gives you a look that says, "At least I have fur." You contemplate borrowing it. Before you can even think about breakfast, you have to wash your face, an act of sheer bravery. You fetch a pitcher of water, which is only slightly above freezing, and splash it on your cheeks. It's the closest thing you'll get to a pumpkin spice latte. Shocking, vaguely painful, and oddly refreshing, in the sense that it reminds you you're still alive. You pause, staring at your own red-faced reflection in the cracked tin mirror, and think, would you trade this for modern Halloween with its central heating? Electric blankets, and the promise of candy at the end of the day? Maybe. But then again, there's something almost heroic about surviving a Halloween morning when the biggest costume you wear is several layers of clothing and a grim determination not to freeze solid before breakfast. And as you trudge into the kitchen, ready to face porridge, chores, and a long day of 1800s Halloween shenanigans, you realize, if you can survive this morning, you can survive anything. Welcome to history. It's cold, it's creaky, and it's only going to get weirder from here. Breakfast is served. A bowl of porridge, slightly haunted by the ghost of last week's oats. If you're lucky, there might be a crust of bread, but don't get too excited. Butter is a luxury, and jam is a rumor started by rich people. As you chew, you wonder if anyone in this century ever tasted sugar. Let's talk about breakfast in the 1800s, when the most important meal of the day was mostly important for its ability to lower your expectations. You shuffle into the kitchen, clutching your shawl like it's body armor. There's no gentle aroma of coffee brewing, no stacks of pancakes dripping with syrup, and definitely no cinnamon rolls. Instead, you're greeted by a cast-iron pot perched on the wood stove, filled with something that can only be described as mysteriously beige. The porridge, or parritch, as your Scottish ancestors might proudly declare, is made from oats, water, and whatever hope survived the night. It's been simmering for what feels like centuries, first over the dying embers, then reheated in the morning. The consistency is thick enough to stand a spoon upright, and the taste is, well, persistent. Each bite is a reminder that culinary variety was not a priority for most families. Sometimes, if last night's dinner was particularly grim, you'll find a surprise in your bowl, a turnip chunk, a lone bean, or a piece of carrot determined to see another day. If you're from a slightly wealthier household, perhaps there's a little milk to stir in, cold and flecked with cream that stubbornly refuses to mix. But for most, breakfast is all about making do. You scrape the sides of the pot, listening to the familiar sound of porridge clinging for dear life, and try not to think about what's lurking at the bottom. Nobody knows for sure. It might be yesterday's porridge. It might be a family heirloom. And then there's the bread. Don't expect fluffy loaves or sourdough boules. What you get is a hard, dark, brick-shaped loaf that's more weapon than food. It's made from rye, barley, or whatever grain was cheapest that month, and the crust could deflect a musket ball. You attack it with a dull knife, saw off a chunk, and wonder if teeth are really necessary for survival after all. The bread tastes like, well, old bread, earthy, dense, with the faintest suggestion of salt if you're lucky and a hint of dirt if you're not. If you want butter, you'll have to wait for Sunday, or at least until you can sneak a pat from the larder without being caught by your older sibling, who's already watching you like a hawk. If you have siblings, breakfast is less a meal and more a competitive sport. Elbows are thrown, bowls are swapped, and the coveted corner piece of bread becomes a source of household tension. Someone always complains, "This is cold," and someone else always insists, "It builds character." If a parent is present, you're reminded that in their day, breakfast was even worse. Cold gruel, no shoes, uphill both ways to the field. Classic. Drinks, forget orange juice, tea, or even decent coffee. Most likely, you're sipping weak, lukewarm coffee substitute made from roasted chicory root, acorns, or, in particularly bleak households, boiled twigs. Milk is rationed, tea is reserved for guests, and anything sweet is more myth than menu item. If you get a taste of molasses, you savor it like a Victorian child who's just seen the ocean for the first time. There's one other element to breakfast in the 1800s. Leftovers. Nothing is wasted. If someone couldn't finish their porridge, it's pressed into a tin for tomorrow, or fried up with bacon scraps for the rare, glorious Sunday fry. Waste not, want not, is less a motto and more a threat. Repeated by every grandmother with the authority of a medieval pope. And through it all, breakfast isn't just about food, it's about ritual. It's the one time of day when the whole family gathers, grumbling, shivering, sometimes laughing at the youngest's attempts to sneak sugar from the canister. Stories are swapped. Chores are doled out. And if you're lucky, someone tells a joke so dry it could be used as kindling. So you sit there, spoon in hand, facing down your bowl like it's a rival in a duel. It's not glamorous, it's not delicious, but it's history. And as the last oat clings stubbornly to your spoon, you remember, this is just the beginning. There's a whole day of Halloween chaos ahead, and if you're full even a little bit, you're already ahead of the game. Time to dress. Layer upon layer of wool, linen, and whatever smelled least offensive on the chair. Clothes are designed for warmth, not style, and they all itch. You check your hair for uninvited guests, because nothing says festive like a lice inspection. Let's not sugarcoat it. Getting dressed in the 1800s is less getting ready and more constructing a personal fortress against frostbite and judgment. You stare at the modest pile of clothes in the corner, each piece folded with hope and, let's be honest, a lingering aura of previous adventures. The air is chilly, and the goal is simple. Put on enough layers to feel slightly less like a popsicle, and slightly more like someone who might survive until lunch. You start with your underclothes, which are neither soft nor luxurious. Linen shifts or shirts are the baseline, offering the delicate comfort of a burlap sack, but they're your only defense against the itchiness of wool. Next comes a pair of woolen stockings, with more holes than a plot in a ghost story, and a suspicious dampness that never seems to go away. If you're really unlucky, your only pair is still wet from yesterday's failed attempt at laundering, also known as waving it near the fire and hoping for the best. Then you reach for the main event, the wool dress or trousers, depending on your lot in life. The fabric is thick, scratchy, and unyielding, designed not to flatter but to endure years of rain, soot, and whatever the cat dragged in. If you're especially fashion-forward, or simply have access to a grandparent's trunk, you might add a second petticoat or a waistcoat, which only enhances your resemblance to a very anxious onion. In colder parts of the world, layering is less about trends and more about basic survival. Each layer traps a little heat, though by heat we mostly mean slightly less cold than outside. Now, let's talk outerwear. Shawls, cloaks, and coats are essential, all equally heavy and all imbued with the lingering scent of damp sheep. A scarf, if you're lucky enough to have one, is wrapped several times around your neck, both as insulation and as a convenient place to wipe your nose when no one's looking. Gloves are prized possessions, often mismatched, with fingers poking through like determined earthworms seeking the Sunday Shoes don't make me laugh. Leather boots, if you have them, are stiff, cracked, and more decorative than waterproof. Many just settle for wooden clogs or sturdy lace-ups patched so many times the original material is a distant memory. And if you're really having a rough morning, you just wrap your feet in rags and hope for the best. Call it peasant chic. The important thing is that your feet are at least somewhat protected from the icy floor, even if your toes are staging a small, silent protest. Now, hair. The crowning glory of every Halloween morning. Brushing is less about style and more about pest control. Combs are wooden, teeth are missing from both comb and owner, and every family has their own recipe for delousing, usually involving vinegar, lard, and prayers to at least 3 different saints. You check behind your ears, searching for movement, and if you find any, well, congratulations, you're officially part of the family. Children line up for their turn under the knit comb, and adults pretend not to mind the occasional itch. Personal space is a modern luxury. Jewelry, if any, is purely sentimental. A ribbon, a brooch, maybe a bead necklace passed down from someone who insists it's lucky. Pockets are rare, so anything you want to keep safe is either tied to your waist, hidden in your boot, or entrusted to the black hole that is the family's communal things drawer. Fashion statements? Only if you count "I'm not freezing to death" as a trend. Once fully dressed, you move with the grace of a stuffed armchair. Every step is accompanied by the gentle swoosh of fabric, the scratch of wool, and the faint jingle of whatever household item you forgot was sewn into your hem last winter. You are, at this point, approximately 40% warmer, 100% itchier, and just a little bit resentful of anyone who ever called this the good old days. By the time you finally trundle out of the bedroom, you look like a cross between a well-insulated scarecrow and a determined survivor of a laundry avalanche. Style? Optional. Warmth? Mandatory. Regret? Guaranteed. Welcome to Halloween, 1800s Fashion Edition. May your layers be thick, your lice be few, and your dignity survive until supper. The house needs to be cleaned for tonight's gathering, which, in practice, means shoveling ash from the hearth, cursing at soap made from animal fat, and pretending you don't see the mouse that just moved into the bread bin. Your only vacuum is a broom, and it's losing bristles by the minute. Housework in the 1800s is not for the faint of heart or the clean of fingernail. Forget about robotic vacuums, multi-purpose sprays, or that magical device known as a washing machine. Here, every task is manual, messy, and performed with a level of optimism that's frankly unrealistic. On Halloween, the stakes are even higher. You're not just trying to survive another day of dust and despair. You're preparing your home to impress neighbors, in-laws, and whichever distant relatives show up smelling suspiciously of root vegetables. You start with the hearth, the smoky heart of the house. It's covered in a fresh layer of ash from last night's attempts to stay warm and cook something vaguely edible. Cleaning it means scooping handfuls of grey powder into a bucket, desperately trying not to sneeze and redeposit your progress back onto the rug. The smell of old wood smoke lingers in the air, blending with a bouquet of boiled onions and last week's turnips, which, at this point, have more scent than substance. No matter how hard you scrub, the stone never looks clean. It just looks slightly less haunted. Next up, floors. Carpet is a myth reserved for the rich or the extremely delusional. Your floorboards are bare, stained, and dotted with mysterious sticky patches. There's a scattering of straw here and there, meant to freshen the place up, but mostly serving as camouflage for dropped crumbs and the occasional beetle with big Halloween plans of its own. Sweeping is an exercise in futility. Your broom is down to its last few bristles, more of a suggestive gesture than an effective cleaning tool. You attack the dirt with gusto, sending clouds of dust swirling into sunbeams and straight up your nose. If you manage to sweep the debris out the door, congratulations, you've just added it to the neighbor's porch. Laundry is next on the agenda, and it's about as much fun as wrestling a greased pig. Clothes are washed with soap made from lye and leftover animal fat, and the scent can best be described as aggressively natural. You haul heavy buckets of water from the well, scrub everything on a washboard until your knuckles are raw, and then hang it all in the yard, hoping the sun remembers to shine. The wind does its best to help, but mostly just distributes the smell of damp wool throughout the village. If you're lucky, the local dog won't run off with your best petticoat before the neighbors arrive. Then there's the kitchen. The bread bin is alive, and not in a comforting Disney way. You spot a mouse making a daring dash behind the flour sack, clearly unimpressed by your half-hearted attempt at shooing. The kitchen table is wiped down with a rag that's seen better days, probably when it was still someone's shirt. Any remaining freshness is provided by a pot of boiled vinegar simmering on the stove, a tradition that claims to purify the air, but mostly just makes everyone's eyes water and adds an acidic note to smellscape. Every surface is scrubbed, every corner poked, every window smudged to maximum transparency. You attack the cobwebs with a vengeance, apologizing quietly to any spiders you dislodge. The oil lamp chimneys are polished, leaving you with greasy hands and the faint sense that you've just accomplished something monumental. Any decorative efforts involve a half-hearted arrangement of dying flowers and maybe, if you're feeling festive, a turnip with a face carved into it. Martha Stewart has nothing to fear, but the pièce de résistance is always the front entry. The door is given a quick wash with whatever soapy water is left, and a broom is propped up invitingly outside, half welcome, half threat to any would-be muddy-booted guests. If you have a mat, it's shaken out. If not, you just hope the mud on the step isn't deep enough to swallow your visitors whole. By the end of it all, you're exhausted, smelling faintly of vinegar, lard, and ancient onions. The house is as ready as it'll ever be. Not spotless, not sparkling, but charmingly chaotic and lived in, which is exactly what your guests expect. Because in the 1800s, a clean house is a sign of suspicious priorities. But a haunted one means you're ready for Halloween. Pumpkins aren't always around, so you grab whatever roundish vegetable you can find. Sometimes it's a turnip, sometimes a potato, sometimes something that was probably alive this morning. You hollow it out with a knife so dull it's more of a suggestion than a tool. Let's get one thing straight. Pumpkin carving in the 1800s is nothing like the candle-lit, Pinterest-worthy gourd surgery of today. For one thing, pumpkins aren't a sure bet. Depending on where you live and how the harvest went, they might be expensive, unavailable, or already claimed by the family goat. If you're in Ireland or Scotland, the real MVP is the humble turnip, a root vegetable so sturdy it could survive a nuclear winter and possibly has. Potatoes, beets, and whatever the grocer didn't recognize are all up for grabs, as long as they're even remotely round and hollowable with sheer determination and lower back pain. You sit at the kitchen table, armed with a knife that's seen more bread crust than actual sharpening stone. The kids crowd around, excited, while adults try to feign enthusiasm, knowing they'll be the ones scraping rock-hard turnip flesh out for the next 45 minutes. The process is, in a word, rustic. The outer layer is peeled, then comes the slow, finger-numbing work of digging out the insides, which release a smell so earthy you're pretty sure you've inhaled most of the garden. There's no pumpkin carving kit, just the family paring knife, a spoon, and a questionable nail for detail work. Expect blisters, complaints, and at least one emergency finger bandage. As the hollowing proceeds, someone inevitably asks, "Why are we doing this again?" Tradition, you say, though it's hard to explain that the origins go back to old Celtic rituals. In the old country, people carved faces into root vegetables and set candles inside to ward off evil spirits or just nosy neighbors. The scary faces aren't meant to be cute. They're designed to frighten away ghosts, witches, and probably the neighbor's sheep. Some faces are simple, 2 triangles and a jagged mouth. Others are accidental masterpieces, unintentionally terrifying, thanks to the turnip's naturally menacing expression. If you're lucky enough to have a pumpkin, congratulations. You're either wealthy, American, or both. Pumpkins are bigger, easier to carve, and hold candles without threatening to burn the house down. There's a sense of pride in displaying your jack-o'-lantern on the porch or windowsill, the flickering candle inside making spooky shadows on the walls. The smell of scorched pumpkin mingles with coal smoke and boiled onions, creating an aroma you won't find in any Yankee Candle catalog. But most families aren't so lucky. You work with what you've got. A beet that leaks red juice all over the table, a potato that collapses under its own ambition, or the classic turnip with its thick, waxy skin. Kids compete for the ugliest face, while grown-ups secretly hope someone's artistic attempt won't come alive and haunt them. It's a group effort, with commentary from the peanut gallery. That one looks like Uncle Bert after he lost his last tooth, or, if you squint, it's almost a cat. You resist the urge to carve your boss's face into the turnip. Barely. Candles are precious, so they're used sparingly. A stub of tallow or a crusty old beeswax taper is jammed inside the vegetable, sometimes with more smoke than light. When the candles run out, a few brave souls try to use fireflies, which results in disappointed children and confused insects. The final effect is charming, if a little unsettling. The flickering, misshapen faces stare out at the October night, warding off the supernatural, or at least scaring the neighborhood chickens. When the sun sets, the windowsills and doorsteps glow with homemade lanterns, each one a badge of honor, proof that your family knows how to have a good time with very little. It might not be Martha Stewart, but it's pure 1800s Halloween, messy, resourceful, and just a little bit spooky. In the end, it's not about the pumpkin at all. It's about making something out of nothing, laughing together in the candlelight, and hoping your fingers stay attached for tomorrow's chores. There's no store-bought candy. Instead, kids go door to door asking for soul cakes, nuts, or anything edible that doesn't taste like sadness. Sometimes they get apples, sometimes a stern lecture about moral fiber. It's a mixed bag, literally. Let's set the record straight. Trick-or-treating in the 1800s is nothing like a modern suburban sugar rush. There are no fun-sized candy bars, no bowls full of individually wrapped treats, and certainly no plastic pumpkins brimming with Skittles. The very idea of knocking on doors for candy would sound deeply suspicious to most grown-ups. Instead, Halloween night is a free-for-all of ancient customs, cautious generosity, and the relentless pursuit of something, anything, that might count as a treat. Children, and not a few teenagers desperate for snacks, head out at dusk, bundled in homemade costumes that are part disguise, part insulation, and entirely repurposed from laundry day rejects. They're not dressed as superheroes or movie stars, more like local ghost, wanderer scarecrow, or, if you're really committed, anonymous pile of rags. The idea is to be unrecognizable, and if your own mother can't tell who you are under all those scarves, you've succeeded. Going door to door, kids sing rhymes or recite verses, sometimes accompanied by a harmonica or a half-tuned fiddle. There's no trick or treat as a threat. Instead, the exchange is a little more formal and, frankly, a lot more awkward. The traditional request might sound like, "A soul cake, a soul cake. Please, good missus, a soul cake." Or just a hopeful look and an empty pocket. The treat is often a dense, slightly sweet bread cake, baked with currants or raisins if the household is feeling flush. Sometimes it's a hard apple, a handful of nuts, or, on unlucky nights, a boiled potato. You learn to temper your expectations. For the homeowners, this is a test of character and pantry. Giving generously is seen as good luck. Refusing might mark your house for mild mischief or just a bout of local gossip. Sometimes, treats are handed out to appease spirits and bring blessings for the coming winter. Sometimes, it's just keep the neighborhood kids from swiping the last of your firewood. More than one family meets the annual rush with a strategic disappearance. Doors bolted, curtains drawn, and lights snuffed out, as if everyone went to bed at sunset for health reasons. Everyone knows better. Not all treats are edible. If you're unlucky, or simply living in the wrong neighborhood, you might end up with a lecture on hard work, virtue, or the dangers of idleness. There's always one person who claims sugar rots the teeth and the soul, and instead hands out proverbs or a pamphlet on good behavior. The disappointment is real, but it's still marginally better than nothing. Alongside soul cakes and apples, there's a currency of homemade fudge, brittle toffee, or, in the more rural reaches, a generous spoonful of whatever jam didn't ferment over the summer. Kids trade and barter their loot as soon as they're out of sight. I'll give you my nut for your cake, or trade you a boiled beet for literally anything else. The whole process is rowdy, haphazard, and driven by rumor. If a certain house is rumored to give out real honeycomb, there will be a stampede. If someone gave out roasted chestnuts last year, you never forget. Older kids and troublemakers sometimes indulge in mild pranks if the night is thin on treats. A missing garden gate, a rearranged woodpile, or a smear of soot on the doorknob are all possible reprisals. These aren't serious tricks, just small acts of chaos that signal disappointment and keep the tradition alive. As the night deepens and the air grows colder, pockets fill up with crumbs, sticky fruit, and the occasional treasured coin. Children head home, triumphant or slightly sticky, proud of their haul and eager to compare. There's no sugar crash, just the quiet satisfaction of tradition, the taste of nutty bread, and the knowledge that, for one night, the whole village played along. In the end, trick-or-treating in the 1800s isn't about candy. It's about community, old rituals, and the simple thrill of asking, and sometimes, just sometimes, receiving. And if you don't like what you get, there's always next year, or at least a neighbor's unguarded cabbage patch. Tonight's entertainment. Trying to predict your romantic future by tossing apple peels over your shoulder, or staring into a mirror by candlelight until you see your soulmate, or just your own sleep-deprived reflection. Bonus points if the mirror cracks. Parlor games on Halloween in the 1800s are nothing short of mystical chaos, a fever dream of superstition, peer pressure, and the desperate hope that something in your damp, turnip-scented life will one day lead to a happy ending. You can forget about scary movies or scrolling social media. Instead, your whole evening's excitement is wrapped up in bizarre rituals passed down from someone's great-great-grandmother, all promising to reveal whether you'll marry, inherit a fortune, or at the very least, not end up haunting the family outhouse for eternity. The scene is set. The parlor is dimly lit by sputtering candles or, if you're lucky, an oil lamp struggling against a draft. Shadows flicker against wallpaper that's seen better decades. Family and friends crowd around, elbow to elbow, all determined to tempt fate or just avoid helping with the dishes. Someone produces a battered copy of the Book of Superstitions, and the games begin. First up is the classic apple peel game. You grab an apple, preferably not the wormiest one from the trick-or-treat stash, peel it in a single, unbroken spiral, and toss the peel over your left shoulder. When you turn to look, it's supposed to form the initial of your true love's name. More often, it just looks like a question mark, a squiggle, or the number 2, which prompts long, awkward explanations for the rest of the year. If you see something resembling an R, you might get excited until everyone else in the room claims it's clearly a Q or maybe a snake. Next is mirror gazing, one of the most theatrical and mildly terrifying traditions. The bravest, or most foolish, among you grabs a candle and stands before the largest, least streaky mirror in the house. The idea is simple. Gaze into your reflection, and, if the spirits are willing, your future spouse will appear over your shoulder. What actually happens is a lot of nervous giggling, some shrieks when the candle flickers, and at least one person who claims to have seen something, only to realize it was their own shadow or a strategically placed potted fern. Still, there's an undeniable thrill, part anticipation, part fear that the only thing you'll see is yourself, with dark circles under your eyes and a suspicious porridge stain on your chin. Another favorite is the dumb supper, a silent meal set at midnight for the ghosts of future husbands or wives. Plates are set, food is served, and not a word is spoken. Participants hope for a ghostly sign, a flickering candle, a draught, or perhaps the mysterious appearance of a sock nobody's seen in months. Inevitably, someone sneezes, someone giggles, and the only spirit that shows up is Aunt Muriel, who's been sleepwalking since Michaelmas. There's also the pulling of Snapdragon, a game where raisins are dropped in a bowl of burning brandy and daring souls try to snatch them out with bare fingers. The risk of mild burns is high, but so is the entertainment value, especially when Uncle Edgar sets his cuff alight and everyone debates whether that's a sign of good fortune or just poor coordination. Cabbage stalk pulling is another classic. You sneak into the garden, blindfolded, and pull a cabbage from the ground. The size, shape, and character of your cabbage supposedly predicts the personality of your future spouse. Pull a big, leafy one? Lucky you. Get a shriveled, muddy root? Well, best lower those expectations. Through it all, the mood is giddy, superstitious, and just a little bit conspiratorial. Everyone's secretly hoping for good news from the spirit world, but everyone's also quick to laugh off bad omens, or at least blame them on the weather. It's a chance to flirt, to tease, to dream, and above all, to keep the long October night at bay with a little bit of magic. By the time the games wind down, you're left with a room full of giggles, ambiguous prophecies, and at least one broken teacup. The future remains as mysterious as ever, but tonight, with friends and candlelight, you feel just a little more hopeful and a little less afraid of the dark. Nothing says fun like dunking your face into a barrel of chilly water filled with floating apples. The rules are simple. Keep your hands behind your back and try not to inhale half a gallon of mystery water. If you win, you get an apple. If you lose, pneumonia. Welcome to the most iconic, least hygienic party game in the 1800s Halloween arsenal. Apple bobbing, also called ducking for apples, sounds charming in theory. In reality, it's more of a slapstick competition in respiratory survival, dental prowess, and how well your family can hide their laughter when you come up spluttering and red-faced. The apple barrel is dragged in from outside, still faintly sticky from its last job storing cider or livestock feed. Someone fills it with well water, so cold it should come with a warning label. If you're lucky, they at least fished out the frogs first. Contestants line up. Faces flushed from the fire, or just sheer terror, and take turns kneeling beside the barrel. The first few kids are always eager, until their chins hit the icy surface, and the shock makes them reconsider every life decision. Tradition demands no hands, which means all the action happens with your mouth. It's equal parts athletic event and comedic spectacle. Teeth snap, lips freeze, apples dodge with an agility they definitely didn't have in the orchard, and the water splashes everywhere. If you manage to bite into an apple and yank it out before losing all feeling in your nose, you're declared the winner, cheered by the assembled crowd, and gifted the dripping apple as a prize. As a bonus, you also get a faceful of cold water and a slightly looser tooth. If you're not feeling lucky with apples, there's always the even riskier snap apple. Someone hangs apples from the ceiling with a string, and you must grab a bite while keeping your hands behind your back and your dignity firmly on the line. This game has the added joy of swinging apples that knock you in the forehead, tangle in your hair, or just fall to the ground in a mushy defeat. The person who invented Snap Apple was clearly both a genius and a menace. Of course, Apple games aren't the only watery disasters available for your entertainment. There's the classic ducking for nuts, which is like apple bobbing but with objects so small you risk swallowing them and turning a wholesome family event into a dramatic medical emergency. The nuts, walnuts or hazelnuts, bounce, roll and evade capture with the skill of seasoned escape artists. Winners get the nut, a round of applause, and a lifelong aversion to walnuts. Adults occasionally join in, urged by children and fueled by a sense of nostalgia or possibly just a mug of mulled cider. Nothing bonds a community like watching the town blacksmith try to bite an apple without his false teeth, or the vicar shriek as he accidentally dunks his wig. In the 1800s, embarrassment is communal, and the ability to laugh at oneself is as important as knowing which fork to use at Sunday supper. Cleanup is its own adventure. By the end of the evening, the kitchen is awash with puddles, muddy footprints, and the sticky detritus of half-eaten fruit. Someone inevitably slips. Someone else blames the apple barrel for the new draft under the door. And everyone agrees that at least nobody drowned. If you're lucky, the family dog gets to polish off the bruised apples, and the barrel goes back outside, ready to be refilled with something less festive and more agricultural tomorrow. Despite the risk of wet collars and sniffles, apple bobbing and its aquatic cousins remain beloved Halloween staples. The laughter echoes, the apples keep rolling, and for one night, the cold, damp kitchen is a scene of genuine joy. Proof that sometimes the simplest traditions are the ones that stick and drip the longest. Whether you win an apple or just a story to tell, you've earned your place in the soggy annals of Halloween history. You bake soul cakes, which are less cake and more slightly sweet bread puck. They're offered to wandering neighbors or children, and sometimes even left out for ghosts. If you're lucky, you get to eat one before the mice do. Let's talk about the great Halloween treat of the 1800s, the legendary soul cake. If you're picturing a soft, frosted cupcake, prepare to adjust your expectations dramatically downward. Soul cakes are sturdy little discs, round, golden, faintly sweet, and able to withstand a drop from shoulder height. In the 1800s, these humble bakes serve as both snack and spiritual offering, uniting the worlds of the living, the dead, and anyone with unexpectedly strong teeth. The baking begins early in the day, because you're working with yeast and an oven that takes a solid hour just to decide whether it feels like cooperating. The kitchen fills with the smell of flour, spices, if you're lucky, and nervous anticipation. There's no stand mixer, just elbow grease and a big wooden spoon. Ingredients are basic. Flour, a bit of butter or lard, dried fruit if you're fancy, a little sugar or honey if the household is flush, and spices like nutmeg, allspice, or cinnamon, which are strictly rationed and guarded by someone's grandmother, like the family jewels. The dough is dense, more like bread than cake, and shaped by hand into thick, palm-sized rounds. While the soul cakes rise by the hearth, the children hover, hoping to steal one early. But tradition says you don't eat them all yourself. These cakes have a purpose. They're given away to solars, neighbors, children, or even the very poor, who go door to door singing rhymes and asking for prayers for the dead. Sometimes, soul cakes are left on windowsills or at the edge of the garden, offered up for wandering spirits believed to visit on All Hallows' Eve. The idea is simple. By giving away soul cakes, you secure good fortune for the living, mercy for the dead, and, if all goes well, a mouse-free pantry. The ritual of souling is part charity, part performance. Groups of children and a suspicious number of teenagers with deep voices and fake freckles roam the village, singing a familiar tune. A soul, a soul, a soul cake. Please, good missus, a soul cake. An apple, a pear, a plum, a cherry, any good thing to make us merry. Some households offer cakes. Some provide apples, nuts, or nothing but a lecture on the value of thrift. At each door, the soulers recite their lines, Say a quick prayer for the homeowner's departed relatives and move on. Pockets full of slightly squashed treats and an occasional boiled beet that nobody wants to claim. It's an old custom, half solemn, half opportunistic, equal parts spiritual and strategic snack gathering. For the hosts, the tradition is both a point of pride and a source of mild anxiety. There's a rush to bake enough cakes for every caller. If you run out, there's always the backup. Slices of hard cheese, stale bread, or in desperate moments, whatever's left from last night's stew. Soul stew never caught on. Each family hopes their offerings will bring good luck, or at least keep their house off the local ghost's itinerary. Soul cakes aren't just handed out at the door. Some are left on graves or near crossroads for lost souls, and a few are tucked away for family members who can't be home this Halloween, living or otherwise. The act is both practical and poignant, an acknowledgement that the veil between worlds is thin tonight, and it never hurts to stay on the right side of a friendly ghost. And let's be honest, soul cakes taste best when eaten illicitly, snuck from the cooling rack, warm and fragrant, with sticky fingers and crumbs trailing behind you. They're simple but satisfying, dense, a little dry, faintly spiced, and inexplicably comforting on a cold night. If you manage to snag one before they're all distributed, you savor it, knowing that you're not just indulging in a snack but carrying on a tradition as old as superstition itself. By the time the last cake is given away and the last prayer is whispered, you're left with the cozy satisfaction of having fed the hungry, honored the dead, and maybe, just maybe, secured yourself a night free from spectral visits or rodent heists. Soul cakes. Proof that the best Halloween treats are the ones that feed both body and spirit, and maybe keep a ghost or two happy in the process. Costumes are homemade, and they're usually terrifying, not by design, but by necessity. Old sheets, soot, and vegetables with faces carved into them are the tools of the trade. The goal isn't to look cute, it's to look like you crawled out of the compost heap. If you thought Halloween costumes in the 1800s involved sparkles, glitter, or clever pop culture references, you are in for a rude and lumpy awakening. The average costume this century is part survival strategy, part last-ditch effort to scare away both evil spirits and judgmental neighbors. There's no Amazon, no Spirit Halloween store, and definitely no plastic vampire teeth, unless you count Grandpa's emergency wood-carving project gone horribly wrong. The creative process starts in the kitchen or the barn, wherever the most salvageable materials are found. The family scours trunks, closets, and laundry piles for anything that can be layered, wrapped, or otherwise draped across a shivering child. Old nightgowns? Yes. Torn shirts and ragged trousers with knees worn out from generations of weeding? Absolutely. The clothes are mismatched, too large or too small, and frequently damp from their last washing, which may or may not have involved a rain barrel and wishful thinking. For many, a white sheet with hastily snipped eye holes is as good as it gets, a ghost by default, though the resemblance to a laundry accident is uncanny. For the more adventurous, soot from the hearth is used as instant face paint. A streak across the cheeks transforms anyone into a mysterious spirit, or more likely, a mischievous chimney sweep. Potatoes carved into masks are worn with twine or string, creating an effect that is less enchanting fairy and more escaped vegetable criminal. And of course, the infamous turnip lantern is sometimes worn as a hat, both for intimidation and for the vague hope it'll keep your ears warm. Not that warmth is guaranteed. Most costumes provide little insulation, but what they lack in practicality they make up for in horror. The idea, after all, is not to charm, but to unsettle, to frighten away ghosts, fairies, or any wandering creature with malicious intent, or, as the village rumor mill would have it, to finally get back at your siblings for every last prank. Homemade costumes from this era are a blend of trial, error, and please just hold still while I tie this around your ankle. Buttons are optional, pins are mandatory, and if family has an extra scarf or ribbon, it's used to hide stains, tears, or last year's emergency repairs. Adults join in too, sometimes out of nostalgia, sometimes just to avoid being recognized as the one who gave out parsnips last Halloween. With enough rags and confidence, anyone can become a bog spirit, a lost traveler, or simply something that made the baby cry. Costume contests are less about winning and more about surviving until nightfall without freezing or losing a shoe in the mud. Accessories are whatever can be scrounged up. A broom becomes a witch's staff, a mop head becomes wild hair, and someone always manages to find a string of onions or garlic to ward off evil. If you're really lucky, someone's uncle is handy with paper mache, producing a mask so strange and lumpy it would terrify even the most seasoned ghost. If not, a potato sack with a face drawn on it will have to do. Fashion is, in this case, extremely subjective, and yet there's a genuine excitement in the air as everyone parades around, laughing at the most outrageous get-ups, swapping costume pieces, and secretly wishing for next year's ensemble to be slightly less itchy. There's a special pride in knowing that your witch outfit is unlike any other, partly because no one else would ever think to use that many mismatched socks in one look. When night falls, the village becomes a parade of the strange, the spooky, and the genuinely creative. Shadows dance, faces are hidden, and the line between the living and the supernatural blurs just a little. For one magical evening, everyone gets to be something else, at least until it's time to go home. Peel off the soot, and return the vegetable accessories to the stew pot. In the world of the 1800s, that's as close to costume glory as you can get. Some families hold seances, because nothing says cozy holiday like summoning the spirit of a relative who still owes you money. The table creaks, the candles flicker, and everyone pretends not to be terrified, or at least deeply uncomfortable. In the 1800s, spiritualism and seances are the trendy parlor pastime, sort of like a cross between family game night and an existential crisis. The Victorians, in particular, have a peculiar enthusiasm for chatting with the dead, especially on chilly autumn evenings when the wind rattles the windows and the darkness outside feels extra haunted. Halloween, with its long-standing reputation as a night when the barrier between worlds is thinnest, is prime time for the amateur medium. The ritual usually begins after supper, when bellies are full and imaginations run wild. The family gathers in the parlor, everyone from the grandmother with her special gift to the youngest, who just wants to stay up past bedtime. The atmosphere is carefully cultivated, curtains drawn, fire low, and as many candles as the household can afford flickering on every flat surface. Shadows stretch and quiver on the wallpaper, and even the bravest uncles seem to sit a little straighter. If you're lucky, someone has a mysterious old bell or a set of tarot cards, but the bare minimum is a round table, a sense of occasion, and the willingness to blame creaking floorboards on the supernatural. The medium, self-appointed or otherwise, takes charge. This is usually the most theatrical member of the household, armed with a shawl, a faraway gaze, and a voice that could sell snake oil at the county fair. Hands are clasped around the table, and all are instructed to concentrate very hard and think of Uncle Silas, or anyone else who left behind an embarrassing will. Sometimes, a few brave souls ask the spirits for specific advice. Should we dig up the turnip patch? Or just move? Is Cousin Abigail really engaged to the baker? Or is that just village gossip? The dead are expected to have opinions on everything. The session begins with a call for any spirit who wishes to make themselves known. Questions are asked, slowly, solemnly, and always in the kind of voice that suggests you expect thunder to rumble at any moment. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak? If a candle flickers, everyone gasps. If a floorboard pops, all eyes dart to the ceiling. Most of the time, The spirits are frustratingly quiet, which gives Aunt Beatrice time to dramatically sigh and warn of unquiet energies. Occasionally, the family cat jumps onto a lap at just the wrong moment, triggering a collective leap worthy of a music hall comedy. Every sound and shiver is interpreted as a sign. A cool breeze? Grandfather's presence. A clock striking the hour? A message from the other side. Even the accidental nudge of the table by a restless child becomes cause for breathless speculation. If you're feeling particularly daring, you might attempt table turning, encouraging the table to tip and spin in response to yes or no questions, at least until someone's drink spills and the séance devolves into chaos. Not all spirits are welcome, of course. Any sign of negativity, like an especially cold draft or an uncle who won't stop snoring, is met with a flurry of hasty goodbyes. The session always ends with someone, usually the most anxious participant, reciting a protective prayer or firmly announcing, "We now close the circle," as if that's all it takes to keep a horde of ghosts from settling in for tea. At the end of it all, the candles are snuffed, nervous laughter fills the room, and everyone agrees not to mention that one time Great Aunt Hilda swore she saw the ghost of her parakeet. The whole affair is half genuine hope, half tongue-in-cheek performance, and fully an excuse to gather close and feel that delicious shiver of what if. Whether you actually reach the other side or just stir up a little family drama, the séance is a Halloween tradition that proves the dead aren't the only ones with unfinished business. So you tuck yourself in later that night, listening for creaks and whispers, and wonder, did Uncle Silas have any final words? Or was he just as lost as the rest of us, trying to make sense of a world where even the living can't always get their message across? Garlic on the windowsill, iron under the pillow, a horseshoe above the door. You're not paranoid, you're prepared. The line between tradition and low-key panic is very thin. The 1800s may be a century of steam trains and scientific lectures. But when it comes to Halloween night, the entire house transforms into a fortress of superstitions, wards, and half-remembered rituals from the old country. You might have survived the morning's chill, the haunted porridge, and a séance with the in-laws, but now the real work begins. Keeping the supernatural at bay, one bizarre precaution at a time. First, there's the garlic. Not just for cooking, garlic is the MVP of the supernatural defense team. It's braided and hung from rafters, wedged into windowsills, and, if you live near a graveyard, sometimes carried in your pocket. The pungent smell fills the house, making it impossible for any self-respecting spirit, neighbor, or hungry vampire to stick around for long. Children are sent to tuck a clove behind every door, partly as protection, partly to keep them busy and out of the soul cakes. Next comes the iron. An iron nail, horseshoe, or even a cast iron skillet stashed under the bed is said to confuse or repel wandering spirits. Why iron? Ask anyone, and you'll get a confident explanation that makes less sense the longer you listen. Spirits can't cross iron, says Grandpa, because iron is too honest. You don't ask follow-up questions. You just wedge that horseshoe over the doorway, open side up to catch the luck, and hope the only thing coming in tonight is a cold breeze. Salt is another classic defense, if you have any left after preserving the family's winter rations. A circle of salt around the hearth, a pinch on the windowsill, or a discreet line at the threshold are all supposed to keep spirits from crossing into your home. It's also handy for fending off anyone who says your soul cakes are too bland. Every time someone spills salt, there's a mad scramble to toss a pinch over the left shoulder, just in case the devil is lurking behind you, bored and ready to cause trouble. The placement of brooms, rakes, and even the family's best walking stick all matters. Leaning a broom across the doorway? Spirits will trip, obviously. Laying it flat by the back step? That's a sign to fairies that they're not welcome. Some people sweep the entire house before sunset to chase out evil, which really just chases out dust and occasionally a disgruntled pet. Mirrors are another concern. On Halloween, every reflective surface is a potential portal. If you must have a mirror out, it's usually covered with a scarf or towel, just in case a lost soul tries to drop in for a visit. The more dramatic members of the family might turn the mirrors toward the wall or stash them in a wardrobe for the night, swearing it's for safety. If you ask why, they'll only shake their heads and mutter about what happened to the Petersons down the lane. Then there are the odds and ends. Rowan twigs tied with red thread above the mantelpiece, a silver coin slipped under the doormat, and a piece of bread set aside for the wandering poor, living or otherwise. Some swear by holy water flicked at the doorframe, others by saying a prayer in every room at dusk. The best approach is to do all of them at once. After all, you never know what works until you try it. And Halloween is not the night to get experimental. By the time darkness falls, the house is festooned with enough garlic to ward off an army, bristling with iron and salt, and filled with the comfortingly odd scent of candles, bread, and slight anxiety. Every creak and rustle is blamed on the wind or, failing that, on the fact that someone forgot to prop the broom up correctly. But even skeptics can't resist glancing over their shoulders, just in case. You lie in bed that night, tucked beneath extra blankets, secure in the knowledge that you've done everything humanly possible to keep evil spirits, and possibly nosy relatives, outside where they belong. Whether or not the superstitions work is beside the point. On Halloween, there's real comfort in ritual, in garlic, and in knowing that at least for tonight, you're as safe as a person surrounded by iron and carbs can possibly be. Tonight's meal is a feast by 1800 standards. Boiled potatoes, roasted root vegetables, and maybe a piece of meat. If you're upper class, it's a spread. If you're not, it's just slightly more food than usual, seasoned with hope. The Halloween feast in the 1800s is the high watermark of the day. A communal event where the table groans, not under the weight of food, but under the collective effort and expectation of everyone in the house. Preparations have been underway since before sunrise, involving more peeling, chopping, and muttered prayers than any meal outside Christmas or Michaelmas. For many, this is the one night of autumn when the pantry is raided for a few precious extras. Tonight, you're not just eating to survive, you're eating to celebrate. Even if most of what you're celebrating is the miracle of still having teeth. The main feature is potatoes. There are boiled potatoes, mashed potatoes, potatoes roasted in the ashes, and, if you're daring, a potato cake fried in leftover bacon grease. Root vegetables of every stripe make an appearance. Carrots, parsnips, beets, and turnips, boiled, baked, or mashed within an inch of their lives. If you're lucky, the carrots still taste vaguely like carrots and not like the earthy soil they grew in. The real treat is butter, brought out in a tiny dish, fiercely protected from the greedy eyes of children and any dog with a working nose. If you're among the well-off, you may have a roast on the table, beef, mutton, or a suspiciously small chicken. The meat is carved ceremoniously, with each person receiving a slice so thin it's practically transparent. There's always someone who loudly insists they're saving room for dessert just to avoid the awkwardness of a plate of bones. If you're less fortunate, a bit of bacon, ham, or a few pieces of sausage will have to do, mostly as a garnish to the never-ending parade of root vegetables. Accompanying the main courses are dense slabs of brown bread, crusty and toothsome, sometimes flecked with seeds or, in especially frugal households, stretched with mashed beans. Butter is spread as thin as gossip, and if anyone has a jar of homemade pickles, it's passed around like a family heirloom, carefully rationed, highly coveted, and eyed with suspicion by anyone who remembers last year's vinegar disaster. On the fanciest of tables, there might be a pie, a triumph of kitchen engineering and wishful thinking, apple pie if the harvest was good, mincemeat if the larder still holds its secrets, or pumpkin pie, if you sacrificed your jack-o'-lantern dreams to the dessert gods. Cream is a luxury, doled out with the warning that it must last until Sunday. Stewed fruit, perhaps pears or plums preserved in syrup, provides a splash of color and a glimmer of hope for the future. Of course, for most families, dessert is a handful of nuts, a wrinkled apple, or the remnants of soul cakes baked earlier in the day. Children vie for the choicest bits, and the lucky winner of the hidden bean in a cake or pie earns the dubious honor of leading the first toast, or doing the dishes. The meal itself is equal parts eating and storytelling. As the plates empty, the real entertainment begins. Tales of Halloween's past, family legends, and ghost stories told with wild gestures and whispered warnings. Laughter bounces off the walls, mingling with the clatter of spoons and the crackle of the fire. Someone tries to teach the children a riddle, and someone else inevitably brings up that time a pie crust was so tough it broke a knife. No one is in a hurry to finish. By the end of the feast, you're not so much full as satisfied. Bellies warmed, hearts lifted, and spirits braced for the long, cold months ahead. The leftovers are scraped into a communal bowl for tomorrow's breakfast. Or for the dog, who's been practicing its pleas. I'm starving face all evening. For one night, the table feels abundant, the company feels festive, and the outside world, with all its chills and shadows, feels very far away. In the 1800s, a Halloween feast isn't about excess. It's about making the most of what you have, savoring the company, and filling your soul as much as your stomach. Because tomorrow, it's back to porridge. Tonight, at least, you feast. Once it's dark, everyone gathers around the fire. You tell ghost stories, each one more absurd than the last. Someone swears the house is haunted. Someone else swears it's just wind and a leaky roof. Arguments ensue. The sun has sunk beneath the hedgerows. The kitchen is awash with dishwater and the remnants of potato peels, and the only light left comes from a handful of candles and the persistent, slightly judgmental glow of the hearth. It's time for that most essential of Halloween rituals in the 1800s. Telling ghost stories. The meal is finished, but nobody is moving far from the warmth, partly because the night outside is freezing, and partly because there's nothing more comforting or thrilling than scaring yourself silly in the company of people who love you enough to laugh when you shriek. It begins innocently enough. Someone, a cousin, a grandparent, maybe the neighbor who just won't leave, clears their throat and starts with a tale from when I was a boy. The stories all follow a familiar rhythm: a lonely crossroads, a mysterious figure, a full moon, the wind howling like a pack of wolves, and, if you're lucky, a chilling twist at the end. Each story is punctuated by the popping of the fire, the gasp of the youngest listener, or the dramatic shadow a storyteller casts on the wall when they lean too close to the candle. Children press closer together, wrapped in shawls and blankets, eyes wide, every creak of the house amplified into a sign of supernatural activity. It's the kind of suspense only a drafty, dimly lit cottage can provide. Someone in the back insists they can feel a cold spot. That's where the old highwayman was buried, I'm sure of it, while another loudly claims that all ghosts are just rats in the walls. The debate is as much a part of the night as the stories themselves. As the night deepens, the tales grow more ridiculous. There's the headless coachman, doomed to circle the village every Halloween until someone returns his missing boot. There's the weeping woman in white, forever searching for her lost pie. The dancing skeleton who once interrupted a harvest festival and left nothing but muddy footprints and one very nervous sheep. For every genuinely spooky tale, there's another that veers dangerously close to comedy. Like the time Uncle Reggie mistook his own reflection for the ghost of old Mrs. Crandall and fainted into a vat of pickled onions. Everyone gets a turn, even the shyest child, who is encouraged and bribed with an extra nut or apple slice to share a tale. The rules are simple: the more outlandish, the better. Props are encouraged. Someone throws a shawl over their head, Another uses a stick as a spectral cane, and at least one cousin will try, and fail, to make ghostly moaning noises without breaking into giggles. The cat inevitably makes a surprise appearance at just the right moment, sending everyone into a fresh round of startled squeals and nervous laughter. Parents and elders lean into the suspense, embellishing stories with warnings about wandering too far from the fire, or what happens to children who don't finish their root vegetables. The bog spirits are always hungry, someone says with a wink, and they love to eat cold potatoes. Laughter, shrieks, and shushing ensue. For a moment, the real world drops away. No worries about chores, blisters, or how many turnips are left in the cellar. It's just the family, the fire, and a whole night ahead to wonder what might be waiting outside the window. Eventually, after the last tale has been told, everyone lingers a little longer by the fire, reluctant to break the spell. Candles gutter low, the embers glow, and stories echo in the hush. Some try to act brave on the way to bed, but more than a few insist on sleeping with an extra blanket or a smuggled lantern, just in case. In the end, ghost stories aren't really about ghosts. They're about making memories, finding warmth in a cold season, and reminding each other that life, however strange, is always better with a little shared fear and a lot of laughter. On Halloween night in the 1800s, nothing banishes the darkness better than a good story, and a house full of voices refusing to be quiet. Outside, the community gathers for a bonfire. It's supposed to ward off evil, but mostly it's an excuse to stand close to actual warmth and gossip about who's secretly dating the blacksmith's cousin. After a long evening of cramped parlor games, overly enthusiastic fortune-telling, and enough root vegetables to haunt your dreams, it's finally time to step out into the chill October night. The air smells of wood smoke and anticipation. The bonfire, sometimes no more than a controlled pile of damp branches, sometimes a towering inferno that would give the fire brigade a panic attack, is the true centerpiece of Halloween in the 1800s. For one night, everyone puts aside the day's drudgery and trudges down the muddy lane, lanterns in hand and children in tow, to see who can get closest to the flames without singeing their eyebrows. The bonfire's official purpose is to ward off evil spirits, send warmth up to departed souls, and maybe remind the sun to come back in spring. But everyone knows the real draw: warmth, spectacle, and the irresistible pull of a shared blaze on a cold night. Villagers, neighbors, distant cousins, and even that mysterious traveler who's been renting the miller's barn for business all drift toward the light. The fire is piled high with whatever won't be missed: broken chairs, old fence posts, last year's failed attempts at handicrafts, and the occasional suspiciously unidentifiable bundle. If you're lucky, someone's added a few green branches for that extra Halloween sizzle and a cloud of smoke that will have everyone coughing and blaming the spirits. Once the fire is roaring, the party begins in earnest. There's no DJ, no playlist, just the crackle of burning wood, the snap of sparks, and a ragtag chorus of voices telling stories and singing half-remembered songs. If anyone brought a fiddle, now's the time for lively reels, and if not, a few brave souls attempt to harmonize anyway. Embers float up into the dark, chased by children who swear each glowing speck is a fairy or a wandering ghost. The warmth is immediate and all-consuming. You stand close until your shins roast, then step back just as your backside starts to freeze. Tradition dictates that each family brings something to toss into the fire as a token: a handful of grain for luck, a twist of wool for protection, or a note scribbled with the name of a personal worry or bad habit offered up to be burned away. Superstitions run wild: leap over the flames for good luck, walk around the fire 3 times to guarantee a happy winter, or just warm your hands and soak in the moment. If someone stumbles during a leap, everyone laughs, and then spends the next year reminding them at every possible opportunity. Gossip flourishes in the firelight. Shadows provide cover for whispered secrets: who's sweet on whom, which family is hoarding apples, and why Mrs. Pritchard's cat seems to have developed a taste for shoelaces. The bravest young folks try to impress one another with increasingly daring stunts, jumping the lowest parts of the fire, singing loudly, or just holding hands in the flickering dark. Inevitably, someone brings food, roasted chestnuts, apples on sticks, or just the last, most suspicious sausage from the kitchen. If you're really lucky, you get a taste of something sweet, like treacle toffee, before it's dropped in the mud and everyone pretends it never existed. The dog, meanwhile, scores a feast, picking up whatever falls and doing its best to look innocent. As the night wears on, the fire burns down and the crowd thins. The embers glow, voices grow softer, and the stories become a little more wistful, hopes for the next harvest, wishes for health, memories of those no longer here. It's a time for both letting go and holding close. The bonfire becomes a silent promise. The cold season is coming, but for tonight, there is warmth, laughter, and the undeniable comfort of knowing you're not alone. And so, you head home smelling of smoke, cheeks flushed, a little bolder against the darkness. The world may be full of chills and shadows, but for a few bright hours, the fire and the company of neighbors make it all feel a little less daunting. That's Halloween in the 1800s, part magic, part mischief, all heart. Halloween isn't Halloween without a little mischief. And in the 1800s, tricks are as much a part of the festivities as the food and fire. Sure, you've spent the day bobbing for apples, tossing cabbages, and staring down your destiny in a murky mirror. But as the evening creeps along and adults get distracted by bonfire warmth and gossip, it's time for the younger crowd to get creative with their own brand of chaos. Forget mass-produced toilet paper or shrink-wrapped eggs. Most villages don't have either. And if they do, the risk of actual punishment is enough to keep things relatively tame. Instead, you'll find yourself with a bar of homemade soap, a potato, or a handful of mud. Windows become prime targets, transformed into smudged works of art by giggling children. The best soap is the extra slippery, stinky kind that leaves a ghostly film and a strong scent behind. A little reminder for the morning. Gates are another favorite. Every Halloween, some unlucky household wakes to find their front gate missing, tucked halfway up the lane or propped on top of the pigsty. In some places, pranksters simply swap neighbors' gates for no reason other than tradition. It's the closest thing you'll get to a village puzzle. Everyone laughing as they carry their mismatched fences home after breakfast. If there are outhouses, you can bet at least one is toppled. The daring, or reckless, climb onto barn roofs to hang cabbage heads from weather vanes, stringing up a row of turnips with faces carved in them like little warning signs. Some even smear molasses on doorknobs or fill boots left outside with straw and pebbles. Simple pranks that walk the line between harmless fun and grounds for a family feud. Older teens take pride in the most elaborate capers. They'll leave cryptic notes, pretend to be wandering spirits, or knock on doors and run, leaving only muddy footprints and a chorus of laughter echoing down the street. Everyone knows who the culprits are, but part of the game is pretending not to, at least until next year, when it's your turn to play the stoic victim. Not all mischief is anonymous, though. Sometimes, groups of children gather to surprise a favorite neighbor with a chore they didn't ask for, scrubbing the steps with the soapy water, moving a woodpile just a little closer to the house, or braiding the neighbor's horse's mane with bits of leftover ribbon. The line between trick and treat blurs, and more than a few grown-ups pretend to be annoyed while secretly delighted by the extra attention. Of course, there are rules. Don't break anything that can't be fixed. Don't prank the grumpy old man who hates fun. And always own up if someone gets hurt. Mischief is meant to bond the community, not split it apart. If things get out of hand, a stern word from a parent or a well-aimed boot is usually all it takes to restore order. By midnight, the village is a patchwork of soap-smudged glass, wandering livestock, and outhouses leaning at questionable angles. Most of the pranks are cleaned up before sunrise, and the only evidence is a handful of sleepy-eyed children and adults with stories to tell until next Halloween. Mischief, in the end, is a way to shake off the darkness, poke fun at authority, and remind everyone that a little harmless trouble is good for the soul. It's not about destruction, it's about laughter, tradition, and the shared light of a community that knows how to laugh at itself. Inevitably, someone gets accused of being a witch, usually the person with the best garden. If you're lucky, it's all in good fun. If you're not, you spend the night hiding your herbal remedies. In the 1800s, the witch panic isn't quite the frenzied, torchlit mob scene of earlier centuries. But suspicion and superstition are still alive and lurking just beneath the surface. Every village has its strange neighbor, the one with the slightly crooked smile, a mysterious cat, and a collection of plants that seem to grow even when everyone else's garden is a dirt patch. She might be a widow, a healer, or simply someone who knows the difference between sage and random backyard weeds. On Halloween, when the air is thick with stories of the supernatural, that person inevitably becomes the subject of the year's witch jokes. It starts innocently enough. After the ghost stories and the first round of apple bobbing, someone will glance at Mrs. Pickering's window and whisper, "She's probably flying tonight." The younger kids are wide-eyed, the teenagers roll their eyes, and the adults smirk, everyone secretly hoping for a glimpse of something magical, even if it's just her laundry blowing in the wind. The witch herself might play along, winking at children, making wild predictions, or offering a piece of her special candy. Most of the time, it's just peppermint, but the psychological power of suggestion is strong, especially after sundown. If the crops were good, if the pies rose tall, or if the cows stopped coughing this year, credit goes to her mysterious potions and well-timed advice. The flip side? If there's a bad harvest, a sudden illness, or a particularly disappointing batch of soul cakes, whispers can turn sharper. "It's the witch," someone jokes, only half joking. You learn quickly not to complain about a sore knee or mention that your sheep are acting funny, lest the evening's banter drift in your direction. The local witch panic is less a true crisis and more a village-wide exercise in collective imagination. On Halloween, it becomes the stuff of light-hearted contests. Who can best mimic the local wise woman's cackle? Who dares knock on her door for a charm? Who can find the most unusual root in her garden and claim it's magical? There's often a dare to walk past her house at midnight, or to peek through the window and report back with tales of bubbling cauldrons, which, upon closer inspection, turn out to be soup. But for those with real herbal know-how, it's a night to keep a low profile. Healers and grandmothers tuck their jars and bundles away, hoping no mischievous child gets any ideas about stealing a witch's brew. The town midwife suddenly becomes very popular. Everyone wants a charm for luck or a remedy for the winter sniffles, but no one wants to admit they believe in magic come Sunday morning. Meanwhile, the subject of all this attention is often more amused than offended. After all, being the witch has its perks. You get left alone on laundry day, your garden is mysteriously never pilfered, and the children bring you extra soul cakes for good luck. A wise witch might even stoke the rumors, tossing a handful of herbs on the bonfire for extra smoke, or predicting the weather with uncanny accuracy. Helped, of course, by years of careful observation and the secret calendar tucked behind the flower jar, by the end of Halloween night, the witch panic fizzles as quickly as it sparked. The villagers head home, stories slightly exaggerated, imaginations running wild, and everyone secretly relieved that the only magic on display was the ability to make 3 pies from 1 pumpkin. But for one enchanted evening, suspicion, laughter, and just a pinch of fear make the ordinary feel extraordinary, proving that, when it comes to Halloween in the 1800s, everyone loves a little harmless magic. Black cats are both feared and pampered. If you own one, you swear it brings good luck, unless something bad happens, and then it's definitely the cat's fault. Chickens sometimes get dressed up, but nobody's really sure why. On Halloween in the 1800s, animals are a bigger part of the festivities and the superstitions than you might expect. In a world where the line between luck and disaster feels as thin as a turnip peel, your pets and livestock are roped into the season's rituals, whether they want to participate or not. And honestly, they probably don't. Let's start with the black cat, the true celebrity of Halloween night. In some homes, a black cat is a living talisman. Children and adults alike go out of their way not to cross its path, unless, of course, the family already owns one, in which case it's cosseted, bribed with extra scraps, and fussed over as a furry, purring lucky charm. The cat seems to enjoy the attention, or at least tolerates it, in exchange for sitting by the fire and licking butter off the table. But the moment something goes wrong, a missing pie, a spilled lantern, a sudden draft, it's the cat's fault, and everyone swears it was staring at them funny all night. Other pets don't get off much easier. Dogs are believed to sense spirits, so their barking at the door is enough to set off a new wave of ghost stories and speculation. If the family dog howls at the moon or refuses to go near the bonfire, children gather close and whisper, "It's a sign." Whether it's a good sign or a bad one depends entirely on whether the biscuits burn in the oven. Even the chickens get dragged into the fun. In some households, the bravest hens are dressed up for Halloween, wearing makeshift capes or hats made from leftover ribbons and scraps of fabric. Why? The reasons are never quite clear. Some say it's to confuse evil spirits, some claim it brings good luck, and others just enjoy the annual tradition of trying to chase down a surprisingly agile chicken. The results are almost always the same: a flurry of feathers, an exasperated parent, and a story that gets retold every Halloween. If you have a cow, you'd better make sure it's happy on Halloween. A cranky cow is a bad omen for the winter, and so a few extra apples or handfuls of oats are quietly slipped into the barn, with a muttered wish for good health and lots of milk. If the cow refuses to cooperate, you just hope the local wise woman hasn't predicted a harsh winter, otherwise you'll be hearing about it for months. Animal superstitions don't stop at pets and livestock. Some villagers leave a dish of milk outside for the wandering fairy cat, hoping to avoid mischief. Others tie red ribbons to the tails of horses to keep them safe from witches. A horse found sweating in the morning? Clearly, it was ridden by spirits during the night. No point arguing with the evidence, especially if it means someone else has to muck out the stall. For all the fuss and worry, animals seem to weather Halloween just fine. Cats curl up in the best chair. Dogs beg for scraps at the feast. Chickens, if they're lucky, lose their hats and keep their dignity. By the end of the night, everyone in the house is grateful for their furry, feathered, and four-legged companions, superstitions and all. Because in the 1800s, animals aren't just bystanders, they're part of the family folklore, woven into the fears, hopes, and laughter that make Halloween a night of wild possibility. Whether they bring luck, mischief, or just a bit of comic relief, you wouldn't have it any other way. Some households swear by cabbage fortune-telling. Throw one over your neighbor's fence to find out the name of your future spouse, or just get yelled at for destroying someone's garden. If you think Halloween fortune-telling stops with apple peels and mirrors, you haven't met the 1800s obsession with cabbage-based prophecy. While today's celebrations might involve tarot cards or reading horoscopes, back then, vegetables were the mystic's tool of choice. On Halloween night, young people everywhere turn into amateur oracles, wielding root vegetables with the seriousness of a secret society. The most famous ritual? The legendary cabbage night. Here's how it works. After the bonfire, a gang of young villagers sneaks into someone's garden, often a neighbor's, rarely their own, selects the biggest, most promising cabbage, and yanks it out, roots and all. The trick is to pull it blindfolded, letting fate guide your hand to the right stalk. Once liberated from the dirt, the cabbage is hurled over the garden fence, or, in bolder circles, into the street. Tradition says the cabbage will reveal clues about your romantic destiny. If it lands upright, your future spouse will be steady and reliable. If it tumbles, expect a life full of surprises, or, more likely, chaos. The length of the root is supposed to predict how long you'll wait to marry. If there's a worm inside, well, draw your own conclusions about romance. Some take a bite of raw cabbage on the spot, swearing it gives a vision of their beloved. Others just cough and regret everything. Other divination methods abound, each stranger than the last. Some young women peel a cabbage and hang it over the doorframe. The first person to walk through the door, man, woman, or confused cat, is said to share a name with your future sweetheart. It's not uncommon to see anxious faces lurking in hallways, hoping their favorite neighbor is the next one in. Then there's the ritual of roasting nuts on the fire. You name 2 nuts, one for you, one for your crush, and place them side by side on the grate. If the nuts jump apart, your love will be stormy. If they roast quietly together, marriage is in the cards. The results, unsurprisingly, are open to creative interpretation, especially if one nut just catches fire and burns to ash. People have been known to try this 3 or 4 times, claiming the first result didn't count. Still not convinced? Try naming the cabbage. A group of friends gathers to assign the names of eligible bachelors or bachelorettes to different cabbages, then spin each one on the kitchen table. Whichever cabbage points at you when it comes to rest predicts your future spouse. Is it scientific? Absolutely not. Is it fun? Without question, except, perhaps, for the poor cook who discovers half the winter's dinner rolling around the floor. No matter the method, fortune-telling with vegetables is a Halloween highlight. It's a way for young people to tease, flirt, and giggle behind their hands. The grown-ups pretend to disapprove, grumbling about wasted produce, but everyone knows they did the same thing at that age. Even the sternest grandmother has a story about the year her cabbage pointed at the town's blacksmith, and wouldn't you know, we were married come spring. By midnight, the cabbages are gone, the nuts roasted, and the halls echo with laughter and wild predictions. The gardens may look a little rougher, and there's likely a mild feud brewing over missing turnips. But it's all in good fun. In the end, the future remains deliciously mysterious. And the only thing you can predict with certainty is that next Halloween, someone's cabbage will be missing, and a new round of questionable prophecies will begin. After dinner, it's time for music. Someone produces a fiddle. Someone else tries to sing. If you're lucky, it sounds vaguely melodic. If you're not, well, at least you can claim the howling is just the wind. No Halloween in the 1800s is complete without a musical interlude that teeters between rousing entertainment and a bold test of neighborly patience. There are no radios, no curated playlists, and certainly no karaoke machines, just a handful of brave souls, a battered instrument or two, and a willingness to carry a tune or drop it repeatedly on the floor. The parlor becomes a stage, the barn a concert hall, and every house echoes with the sounds of fiddles, flutes, and singing voices, on-key, off-key, and occasionally somewhere out in the garden. The music begins with a flourish, usually from the resident fiddler, often the same person who can mend a fence, milk a cow, and recite the longest story about their childhood in under 2 minutes. The fiddle is old, well-loved, and probably missing a string. It creaks and wails its way through reels and jigs. The tempo as unpredictable as the October weather. Children clap along, feet stomp on wooden floors, and anyone with an instrument is dragged into the action, no matter how much they protest that it's been years since I played. If a flute or tin whistle appears, there's a round of green sleeves or the girl I left behind me. Notes floating above the noise like ghosts above the moor. Sometimes someone tries a hand at the accordion, which is both a marvel and a menace. Played well, it's the heartbeat of the party. Played badly, It's a reliable way to empty the room. Spoiler, it's usually played badly, but nothing unites a crowd like singing. Ballads, folk tunes, nonsense rhymes, and the occasional dirge for a long-lost sheep are belted out with reckless enthusiasm. The youngest children join in, mangling the verses and inventing new ones on the fly. The elders harmonize or supply thunderous bass lines, their voices raspy from years of cold mornings and strong cider. Even the dog sometimes joins in, much to everyone's amusement. And the cat's horror. No one is safe from participation. You might be called up for a solo, handed a tambourine improvised from a pot lid and some string, or simply told to keep time with a wooden spoon on the hearth. Those who try to hide in the corner are dragged into the center for a group number. The results are rarely pretty, but always memorable. Laughter erupts over missed notes, creative lyrics, and the occasional squabble over which song comes next. The proudest moment is when everyone accidentally sings in the same key for a verse or two, usually by accident, always celebrated as a minor miracle. Between songs, there's always time for dancing, arms linked, feet shuffling, skirts and trousers swishing as the crowd spins around the room. Children chase each other in circles. Grandparents demonstrate steps that probably went out of fashion before Napoleon was born. And anyone who collapses from laughter is immediately revived with another round of music. By the end of the evening, the music winds down. The last notes drift into the night, and the crowd gives one final enthusiastic cheer for the fiddler, the flutist, and the poor soul on the accordion. Ears ring, hearts are light, and for just a while, everyone forgets about tomorrow's chores. The sounds of fiddles, flutes, and off-key singing linger, weaving into memory another thread in the tapestry of Halloween. Because in the 1800s, music isn't just for listening, it's for sharing, for laughing, and for bringing a chilly old house to glorious, chaotic life. Midnight brings the bravest souls out for a walk. You wander the village, hoping to see a ghost and settling for the local drunk, who claims to be one. When the last note of the fiddler has faded and the embers of the bonfire are glowing low, it's tradition for a certain breed of daredevil to venture into the night. The Halloween midnight stroll is part neighborhood patrol, part rite of passage, and part excuse for adults to check that their fences and turnips survived the evening's mischief. For the young and the young at heart, though, it's a mission to test nerves, seek adventure, and maybe glimpse something beyond the ordinary, preferably something ghostly, but a grumpy cow or tipsy neighbor will do in a pinch. The night is colder now, the air damp and shimmering with moonlight or fog, depending on how dramatic the local weather wishes to be. You button your coat, clutch your lantern, and step onto the rutted lane, boots crunching on frost or mud. In every shadow, your imagination runs wild. Was that a cat, or the legendary headless stable boy? Did the wind just rattle the old church gate, or is it the spirit of the miserly squire, returned for another slice of soul cake? The village looks different at midnight. The usual landmarks, well, tree, bakery, that one fence nobody's ever repaired, take on new, sinister shapes. Every window is dark, save for the odd flicker where someone forgot to snuff their candle. The only sounds are your own footsteps, and, if you're not alone, the nervous giggles and shushing of friends determined not to show fear. Someone dares you to touch the churchyard wall. Another claims they see a face in the shadows of the privy. Someone always pretends to have seen something. And the story grows with each retelling until, by morning, half the village believes there was a full-on ghost parade at the crossroads. Traditionally, these midnight strolls come with a set of unspoken challenges. Walk around the old well 3 times without running away, peek through the smithy window and swear the horseshoes moved, or leave an offering at the crossroads for wandering spirits, a coin, a piece of bread, or, more practically, the last of your boiled sweets. You're told these are ancient customs, meant to bring good luck or appease things best left unmentioned, but it's equally likely someone invented them to make sure the lanes got swept by nervous feet. Every stroll has its own cast of characters. There's the would-be ghost hunter who brandishes a stick like a saber, the skeptic who loudly explains every bump and breeze, and the inevitable prankster who slips away just long enough to leap from behind a hedge, causing near heart failure and at least one ruined sock. The real heroes are the animals. Cats slinking through shadows, dogs following along with tails wagging, and the occasional rooster, utterly confused about why anyone is awake at this hour. Sometimes you stumble upon the village's resident oddball, often the local drunk, who, emboldened by cider, claims to be the ghost of Napoleon, or insists he's just had a conversation with a talking owl. You humor him, share a laugh, and add his antics to the ever-growing trove of Halloween tales. As the night wears on, chills and nerves give way to tiredness and camaraderie. You return home in a huddle, shoes muddy, lantern nearly out, heart thumping with relief and excitement. You didn't see any real ghosts, unless you count Old Man Wiggins in his nightshirt, but you did find a bit of magic in the shadows, a reminder that Halloween's real power lies in the stories you tell and the company you keep beneath the uncertain moonlight. The feast leaves behind cold pudding, even colder potatoes. You eat them anyway, because tomorrow is November, and there are no leftovers in the afterlife. By the time the last ghost story has faded into nervous giggles and the embers in the hearth have surrendered to the night, the Halloween feast has retreated into a familiar and humble ritual. Leftovers. In the 1800s, the concept of food waste does not exist. Every crust, crumb, and turnip cube is precious, and the idea of scraping plates straight into the bin would cause your ancestors to roll in their graves, or, more likely, come back to haunt you out of pure culinary outrage. So you find yourself back in the kitchen, surrounded by relatives, neighbors, and hangers-on who seem to multiply after dark. The table is covered in the aftermath, platters scraped mostly clean, a solitary bone here, a puddle of gravy there, and the infamous cold pudding, stoic and untouched, shivering in the shadow of a half-loaf of rye bread. The potatoes, boiled and reboiled, are stacked like stony relics, daring someone to chew them. A few brave souls try to reheat the pudding by holding it over the fire, resulting in more smoke than success. Still, no one complains, at least not out loud. Leftovers are as much a tradition as the feast itself. Children dart in, hoping to sneak an extra apple slice or a sliver of pie, only to be caught by an eagle-eyed aunt who insists, "That's for breakfast." Plates are hastily cobbled together. A wedge of pudding, a scoop of mashed something, a lonely carrot, and if you're very lucky, a scrap of cold meat. The feast now looks like a sampler platter of disappointment, but everyone tucks in with gusto. Hunger is the world's best seasoning, and by the end of October, nobody is picky. Cold pudding, the true star of the midnight table, comes in a bewildering array of forms: plum, bread, or the mysterious suet variety that is equal parts dessert and dental challenge. It's sliced, fried, or just gnawed at in its natural state, passed around with the communal spoon. Some swear it tastes better the next day. Others say this is a lie invented to prevent complaints. Either way, there's never quite enough to go around, and everyone insists they didn't want any in the first place. Meanwhile, potatoes are pressed into service in every conceivable fashion, mashed with leftover butter, fried in bacon grease, or simply popped into a pocket for tomorrow's lunch. Any remaining vegetables are chopped together into a salad, so optimistic it might just be the earliest ancestor of potato salad, minus the mayonnaise and the joy. Leftover bread becomes tomorrow's toast, croutons for soup, or, in desperate times, the main ingredient in yet another pudding. Nothing goes to waste, partly out of thrift, partly out of the knowledge that winter is coming, and every bite counts. The only things left behind are the bones for the dog, and, occasionally, the pudding skin that even the bravest refuse to tackle. This post-feast ritual isn't just about hunger, it's about comfort, resourcefulness, and togetherness. As the last plates are scraped and the final spoon licked, there's a sense of satisfaction that has nothing to do with full bellies. It's a quiet celebration of survival, of making do, and of savoring the simple fact that, for tonight at least, nobody goes to bed hungry. By the time the kitchen empties and everyone shuffles off to their chilly beds, you realize that these leftovers, cold, lumpy, and lovingly fought over, are as much a part of Halloween as any story or song. In the flickering candlelight, with pudding on your plate and family by your side, you're reminded that the best memories are rarely the prettiest, but always the ones you keep coming back to, just like cold pudding, year after year. You wake up to a house full of sticky plates, mysterious stains, and someone asleep under the kitchen table. No one remembers who started the food fight, but everyone has theories. Morning after Halloween in the 1800s isn't a gentle affair. The fire has long gone out, the kitchen is cold, and your house looks like a band of particularly determined spirits rampaged through, armed with nothing but pudding, apples, and bad intentions. The first one up is greeted by a battlefield, crumpled napkins, half-gnawed bread crusts, puddles of something that might be cider, and suspicious footprints leading in and out of the pantry. At least one turnip has gone missing, and no one will admit to knowing why. Someone groans from beneath the kitchen table, a cousin perhaps, or an exhausted parent who simply surrendered to gravity. Their snoring is oddly comforting, a sign that at least some of last night's guests survived. The dog is curled on a chair, sticky with something sweet, and the cat looks both offended and delighted, batting a chestnut across the floor with all the elegance of a courtly dancer. Chickens, having taken advantage of an open door, have pecked their way through the remains of the soul cakes. They seem pleased. The humans, less so. Then comes the collective realization. Everything must be cleaned. In the 1800s, there is no luxury of running hot water, no forgiving dishwasher, and no disposable wipes. Dishes are stacked perilously high, each one encrusted with pudding, gravy, or a mysterious brown substance that, for everyone's peace of mind, is never investigated too closely. Rinds from apples, cheese, and the occasional pumpkin are scattered across every flat surface, forming a sticky mosaic that would probably fetch a good price at a modern art auction. Cleaning begins in silence, broken only by the occasional sigh and the scraping of plates. The lucky ones get to collect the linens, now stained beyond recognition and destined for a boiling session in the washpot. Less fortunate souls are on dish duty, chipping away at the dried remains of yesterday's feast. The floors are swept and mopped, and someone tries in vain to shoo the dog out long enough to brush the crumbs from the hearthrug. Even the chairs seem sticky, and the window glass, once soaped by mischievous children, now sports abstract designs that will linger for weeks. Stories emerge with each new discovery. A misplaced shoe in the pantry. A half-eaten potato wedged behind the settle. A handful of walnuts hidden in a boot. No doubt the result of last night's failed attempt at trickery. As people begin to laugh, blame is gently assigned. You started the pudding fight. No, that was Aunt Bethany and her famous underhand throw. I swear it was the cat. The identity of the original troublemaker is lost to time, and everyone is content to let the legend grow. Despite the exhaustion, there's a sense of camaraderie. Last night's chaos is this morning's shared memory, and the act of cleaning becomes its own ritual. Jokes fly across the kitchen, and the small victories, a pan finally scrubbed clean, a corner of the table revealed beneath the crumbs, are celebrated with the zeal of a victorious army. Children dash in and out, hoping to escape their chores, only to be handed a broom or a dish towel. By noon, the house is more or less restored. The stains linger, the chickens are shooed out, and the last of the cider is quietly poured into someone's mug for medicinal purposes. The cleanup is finished, but the warmth of the night before lingers in every corner. Stories, laughter, and a lingering scent of apples and smoke. Halloween is over, but its chaos remains, tucked away with the memories and the last stubborn pudding rind, waiting for next year's mischief to begin. No Halloween is complete without at least one family squabble over who got the last apple or whether great-grandpa's ghost is really haunting the outhouse. Eventually, everyone agrees to disagree. By the time the candles have sputtered out and only the bravest are still picking at cold potatoes, tensions have reached their peak. After a long day of haunted chores, fortune-telling chaos, and the collective sugar rush from too many soul cakes, it's almost a guarantee that a family argument will break out. Sometimes it's loud and dramatic. Sometimes it's a quiet, simmering contest of glares. But it's always there, woven into the very fabric of Halloween in the 1800s. It usually starts with something small. Maybe someone accuses Cousin Elsie of hiding the best apples. Or there's a heated debate about whether Uncle Tom's story about the dancing skeleton gets taller every year. Maybe it's just a gentle disagreement over who left muddy footprints on the clean kitchen floor, or whose turn it is to feed the chickens. Even old rivalries, long buried and half forgotten, have a habit of reappearing as soon as everyone's sat down together, bellies full and nerves just a little frayed. As the night wears on, the arguments grow more creative. Did great-grandpa's ghost really slam the pantry door? Or was it just the wind? Is it unlucky to sweep the hearth after midnight, or does it ensure good fortune? Can cabbage actually predict the future? Or is that just wishful thinking from someone who's eaten too much pudding? The debates are endless, with every family member an expert in their own corner of Halloween folklore. The children are the first to take sides, loudly supporting whoever is most likely to hand out extra cake. The teens roll their eyes, but secretly enjoy the spectacle. It's better than any ghost story. The elders, meanwhile, declare that none of this happened in their day and proceed to argue about how things used to be done, a memory which, conveniently, seems to change every year. The arguments rise and fall with the mood, like waves lapping against the shore. Eventually, though, the squabbles lose their steam. Maybe someone slips another slice of pie to the aggrieved party. Maybe laughter bubbles up over a particularly ridiculous accusation. I told you, the cat cannot read. He didn't steal your riddle book. Or maybe everyone just gets too tired to care anymore. There's a universal sigh as the clock ticks closer to midnight. The last of the cider is poured, plates are cleared, and someone, usually the person most invested in peace, suggests a round of apologies, or at least a truce. It's in these moments, as arguments fade into yawns and arms slip around shoulders, that Halloween magic works its quietest wonders. The embers in the fireplace are soft and low. Someone hums a lullaby from childhood, and a sense of calm settles over the house. Old stories are retold, now with gentler voices, and the only sound is the occasional giggle from a child who's still awake, listening for ghostly footsteps outside the door. For all the drama and debate, these end-of-night truces are what hold families together. Stubborn love, mutual teasing, and the knowledge that no one else on earth could ever quite understand what it's like to argue over a pudding recipe in the glow of a turnip lantern. Tomorrow, the arguments will be forgotten, replaced by chores, routine, and the shared memory of another Halloween survived. As the house finally goes quiet, you find comfort in the small, familiar sounds. The settling of the old floorboards, the soft snoring of the dog, and the last whispered promise that, come next year, the arguments will return right on schedule. In the end, peace is restored, and sleep comes easier, wrapped in the warmth of family, tradition, and just a little bit of leftover pie. At last, you crawl into bed, exhausted and vaguely sticky from soul cake crumbs. The night is quiet, except for the sound of someone snoring and the distant echo of a parlor game gone wrong. You drift off, wondering if tomorrow will be any less weird. Bedtime in the 1800s is less of a gentle routine and more of a hard-won reward. You limp toward your mattress. If you're lucky, it's stuffed with straw and only mildly lumpy. If not, it's whatever you could scrounge from the barn or an especially generous pile of old coats. Your feet ache, your fingers are cold, and your socks, the ones that survived apple bobbing and mud wrestling, are somewhere between damp and possibly alive. You promise yourself, as you peel them off, that next year you'll have a proper pair, or at least one without a mysterious hole at the toe. You pause at the edge of your bed, surveying the chaos of discarded costumes, half-gnawed apples, and a jacket someone borrowed and never returned. Your pillow is flat, but it smells comfortingly of home. Wood smoke, hint of lavender from the linen press, and, if you're unlucky, the faintest whiff of the family cat. The blanket is scratchy but warm, patched over the years by hands that love you, and heavy enough to keep out most of the night's chill, and, if you're lucky, the occasional drafty ghost. As you climb in, you hear the rest of the house settling down, someone still finishing the last round of chores, banking the fire, checking that the chickens are shut away, making sure no one left a lantern burning or a gate unlatched after all that mischief. A parent shuffles by, muttering about one more thing to do, and a sibling tries to sneak in with a handful of leftover soul cake. You let them because you're too tired to argue, and, secretly, you're glad for the company. The darkness is deep and velvety, broken only by the glow of a dying candle or the occasional flicker from the hearth. The sounds of the village have faded, the laughter, the music, the bonfire, all swallowed by the quiet. But inside, the night is alive, with little reminders of the celebration just past. Your ears ring with snippets of song. Your mind replays the silliest moments, and your cheeks ache from laughing at stories around the fire. For a few minutes, you relive the chaos, the squabbles, the wild fortune-telling, and even the thrill of sneaking an extra slice of pie when you thought no one was looking. There's a magic to this exhaustion, a sense of having been filled up, not just with food, but with memories. You're aware of every ache and scrape, every crumb in your bed, every sock you'll need to wring out tomorrow. But there's comfort here, too. In the familiar lumpy mattress, the warmth of family and friends still echoing in the air, and the knowledge that, no matter how much went wrong, or spectacularly sideways, you're together, safe and warm, at the end of it all. Your eyes grow heavy. You listen for ghosts, but all you hear are the comforting, mortal sounds of your household. The rustle of someone turning over, the dog sighing by the door, and the faint, rhythmic snoring of Uncle George, who always claims he never snores. The worries of tomorrow, muddy floors, leftover chores, the endless November gloom can wait. As you finally drift off, you dream of sweets, of warm fires, of games that never end, and of all the little bits of joy and trouble that make Halloween so strange and so wonderful. In the 1800s, sleep is earned, rest is treasured, and dreams are full of leftover pie and the hope that next year's socks will be just a little bit drier. The sun is barely up and already, someone in the house is moaning about the vapors, clutching a head full of regret and maybe half a turnip. Hangover cures in the 1800s are experimental, to say the least. Someone suggests drinking vinegar. Someone else suggests raw eggs. And everyone agrees never to mix the two again. You sip something called switchel, basically water, molasses, and whatever someone found in the cellar, and hope for the sweet release of either relief or amnesia. The morning after Halloween isn't for the faint of heart. You wake up to a pounding head, a mouth that tastes like the inside of a coal scuttle, and a stomach that swears it's been replaced with a laundry mangle. Every creak of the floorboards is agony, and even the chickens sound too loud. There's no aspirin, no greasy breakfast sandwich, and absolutely no sympathy. at least not until everyone else has checked their own pulse and decided they might survive. If you overindulged last night, mulled cider, questionable punch, or the neighbor's homemade firewater that could fuel a steam engine, you now face the consequences. The Victorians didn't have modern medicine, but they had plenty of theories and even more confidence. The first remedy on offer? A hair of the dog that is more of whatever put you in this state in the first place. It's less about science, more about denial. The logic is simple. You can't be hungover if you never stop drinking. This works until about 10 o'clock. Someone is found asleep in the garden with a carrot for a pillow. For those hoping for real relief, the family kitchen becomes a laboratory of desperation. Switchel, sometimes called haymaker's punch, is the go-to cure. It's a dubious blend of water, molasses, ginger, and vinegar, served cold. If you're lucky, there's a squeeze of lemon. If not, the ginger is just whatever root looked the least suspicious. Switchel claims to refresh the humours and clear the head. In practice, it makes you pucker and forget your other problems for at least a few minutes. Then come the raw eggs. Some swear by swallowing a whole egg for renewed vigour. Others prefer their eggs mixed with stale ale or a pinch of salt, and everyone has a story about the uncle who swore it worked right before he fell asleep in the root cellar. For those not feeling up to the egg challenge, there's always tea, boiled to within an inch of its life, sometimes with mint, more often just whatever leaves were left in the caddy. Strong and scalding, it's more likely to wake you up than heal you. If all else fails, you turn to vinegar. Some say a spoonful of vinegar in water clears the fog. Others just ag and declare they'd rather face the hangover. More experimental households might try pickled onions, honey mixed with cider, or just lying in the dark and hoping for a fast recovery. Through it all, the mood is equal parts misery and camaraderie. Everyone compares notes, exaggerates their suffering, and insists their remedy is the only one that works. By mid-morning, most have found relief, or at least distraction, in hot porridge, strong tea, and a dose of gentle mockery from the children, who are far too cheerful for anyone's liking. In the end, the best cure is simply time, fresh air, and the knowledge that if you survived Halloween and its aftermath, you can survive anything. You promise yourself, as you sip your last mouthful of switchel, that next year you'll take it easy. But as everyone in the 1800s knows, promises made with a hangover are the first to be forgotten when the cider starts flowing again. Once the fortune-telling games start to drag, someone always suggests a prank. Maybe it's swapping out the sugar for salt in Aunt Hester's tea, or quietly pinning a note that says, "Kick me," or "Beware, ghost," to Uncle Giles's coat. The pranks are mild by modern standards, but lethal to dignity. No one is safe, not even the family dog, who spends the evening mysteriously sporting a mustache made from fireplace soot. The parlor after dinner is a hub of nervous energy and too much sugar. After hours of apple bobbing, musical misadventures, and ghost stories that range from the chilling to the downright ridiculous, the adults begin to chat quietly, and the younger crowd's attention span starts to wane. It's only a matter of time before someone, usually the most mischievous cousin, decides that what the night really needs is a bit of spirited troublemaking. The pranks begin harmlessly. There's the classic switcheroo of sugar and salt, a timeless favorite that transforms a hot cup of tea into a mouthful of confusion and betrayal. The victim always tries to recover with grace, but the faces they make become legend, retold for years to come. Next comes the art of stealth note pinning, which requires nerves of steel and quick fingers. The goal is to attach a silly sign, "Beware," "Haunted," "Witch in training," or just a mysterious cabbage drawing onto someone's back without getting caught. Extra points if the prank survives the whole evening. For the more hands-on pranksters, the possibilities are endless. A few carefully placed apple cores in coat pockets, a peeled potato in a boot, or the age-old whoopee cushion recreated with a well-inflated pig bladder, don't ask, and a well-timed jump onto the settee. The unlucky target's reaction sets off waves of laughter, and the pig bladder quickly vanishes, hidden by giggling children who know better than to let it fall into grown-up hands. Even the pets get roped in. A quick swipe of soot to the cat's nose turns it into a midnight marauder, while the family dog, ever patient, sits for a mustache drawn with coal or gets a festive ribbon tied to its tail. The adults, pretending not to notice, secretly keep score of the evening's best improvements. Sometimes, the animals themselves get their revenge. Nothing disrupts a prank faster than a determined cat chasing a fake ghost made from a bedsheet, sending a tray of biscuits flying. The boldest pranks involve teamwork and timing. The mystery handshake, wet sponge hidden up a sleeve, the swapped seats at the dinner table, or the old door tied shut with twine trick are all part of the fun. One ambitious group manages to replace all the firewood with pieces of painted turnip, which results in an impressive display of non-flammable confusion and, eventually, a good story to tell at every future gathering. Of course, there are limits. No pranks during dinner, no hiding anyone's real medicine, and absolutely no putting frogs in shoes. Everyone remembers the great amphibian incident of 42. If a prank goes too far, the pranksters are expected to apologize, and, if needed, mop up any collateral cider. By the end of the night, the parlor is full of laughter, harmless accusations, and just enough confusion to keep things interesting. The pranks fade as bedtime approaches, replaced by tired smiles and whispered promises of next year. Everyone goes to bed with lighter hearts, and even the sternest aunt can't help but smile at the memory of the dog's perfectly twirled mustache. Because in the 1800s, parlor pranks aren't just about mischief. They're about making memories, poking gentle fun at those you love, and reminding everyone that a little foolishness is the true spirit of Halloween. If you're wealthy, you might have ordered a costume kit from a far-off city weeks ago, provided the postman wasn't distracted by sheep, mudslides, or existential dread. These costumes promise elegance but arrive wrinkled and 2 sizes too small, accompanied by a note about continental flair and a vague odor of disappointment. You try to squeeze into velvet breeches and a papier-mâché mask, knowing you'll spend most of the evening explaining what you're supposed to be. In the 1800s, most Halloween costumes are homespun inventions cobbled together from whatever is at hand. Old sheets, last year's trousers, or the contents of a very forgiving rag drawer. But for a lucky few, there's the exotic thrill of the mail-order costume. It's the ultimate status symbol, proof that your family not only has disposable income, but also enough optimism to trust the postal system. You remember placing the order weeks or months in advance, carefully selecting from an illustrated catalogue that promises mystique, grandeur, and a touch of continental wonder for just a few shillings. The anticipation builds as Halloween approaches. Every knock at the door is met with eager eyes and anxious hearts. Has the costume arrived? Is it lost with the sheep in the next county? The postman becomes an unwilling celebrity, grilled daily for news of silks, satins, and feathered hats. When the parcel finally arrives, it's a moment of triumph, at least until you open it. Mail-order costumes are a lesson in managing expectations. The elegant musketeer ensemble looks slightly less dashing and more like a pirate with a fabric allergy. The Venetian noblewoman gown, squeezed flat for postage, emerges with 100 mysterious creases and a suspicious stain near the hem. The papier-mâché mask, touted as sumptuous and enigmatic, is instead oddly lopsided and smells faintly of glue and cabbage. Someone swears they can see a thumbprint in the paint. Getting dressed is a communal effort. Relatives gather to help you tug on stockings, pin up hems, and stuff handkerchiefs into gaps where the fit is off. Shoes pinch, buttons strain, and the mask flaps loosely unless you tie it so tight your ears fold. But no matter, the costume is worn with pride, discomfort, and just a hint of desperation to prove you're as fashionable as the city folk. The reactions are mixed. Younger children look up in awe. Friends and neighbors guess wildly at your disguise. A French marquis? A mysterious magician? Are you meant to be the tragic ghost of Lady Turnip? Each guess is more entertaining than the last. You do your best to stay in character, only to break when you catch a glimpse of yourself in a cloudy mirror and realize the mask is already shedding glitter on your shoes. Practicalities aside, there's a special thrill in being the only one on your street with a store-bought costume. You twirl for the crowd, parading past home-sewn witches, raggedy ghosts, and scarecrows with cabbage hats. Secretly, you miss the comfort of your old patched cloak, but you can't help enjoying the moment. For a few hours, you are the mysterious stranger, the elegant noble, or at least the person brave enough to wear imported velvet on a muddy lane. By the end of the night, the costume will be stained, the mask will be hanging from one ear, and you'll vow never to wear such tight breeches again. But the memory of mail-order glamour, wrinkled, pinching, and gloriously out of place, will linger, retold every Halloween as proof that sometimes the best costume is the one that makes everyone laugh, including you. Everyone swears the outhouse is haunted, especially after dark. The story changes with each retelling. Sometimes it's a jilted lover, sometimes it's the ghost of a sheep, and sometimes it's just Old Man Jenkins with digestive troubles. You learn to hold it until daylight, or risk a midnight encounter with either the supernatural or the very natural and very alive spider colony in the rafters. In the 1800s, the outhouse is both a necessity and a nightmare. Perched at the far end of the yard and built from whatever scraps of wood the last storm didn't claim. It's never quite level, always a little drafty. And on Halloween, it's the centerpiece of a whole subgenre of ghost stories designed to keep children, and, let's be honest, most adults, from venturing out alone at night. The outhouse becomes the backdrop for whispered tales, dares, and the kind of childhood trauma that builds character, or lifelong fears of public restrooms. As dusk falls and the grown-ups tell stories by firelight, someone inevitably brings up the ghost in the privy. The details depend on who's talking. One version tells of a lovesick farmhand who disappeared on All Hallows' Eve, never to be seen again, except for his muddy boots, which reappear every October in front of the outhouse door. Another version features the sheep that met a mysterious end in the very same spot, its bleating echoing through the night every time someone goes out to do their business. Some say the ghost is a grumpy ancestor, still judging the living from the great beyond, and determined to make every late-night trip as terrifying as possible. The outhouse itself doesn't help its reputation. It creaks in the wind, groans underfoot, and always seems colder than the night air. There's the unmistakable feeling of being watched by moonlight, by bats, by spiders the size of small rodents, or by whatever creature, real or imagined, lurks in the gloom. The bravest attempt to whistle as they go, hoping noise will keep the spirits at bay, while the more superstitious recite rhymes, carry a candle, or send the family dog ahead to clear the way. It's not unusual to see a line of children waiting for dawn, each one inventing a new reason why they don't really need to go, after all. For the truly daring, Halloween is the night for outhouse pranks. Someone might tie a bit of cheesecloth to a stick and wave it from behind the door, or scratch on the wood with a twig just as the door swings shut. Shrieks ring out, and the victim bursts back into the kitchen, swearing never to use the outhouse again. At least not until tomorrow. The local legends evolve with every retelling. Sometimes, the ghost becomes a protector, scaring off burglars and wild animals. Other times, it's a mischievous spirit, blamed for missing shoes, cold seats, and mysterious drafts. If the dog barks at nothing, or the door slams in the wind, everyone exchanges knowing glances and says, "It's just the ghost, don't worry. It only haunts on Halloween." Yet, as much as everyone complains, There's comfort in the familiar routine, the mad dash to the outhouse at dawn, the breathless run back, and the collective relief of surviving another Halloween night without supernatural mishap, or, at the very least, only minor spider bites. In the end, the ghost in the outhouse is more than just a story. It's a shared shiver, a village tradition, and an excuse to stick together in the darkness. Long after Halloween ends, the legend lives on, a cautionary tale whispered to the next generation, because in the 1800s, every family needs a little bathroom drama to keep things interesting. The party's over, but in the 1800s, even packing away the decorations comes with ritual. You're not supposed to store turnip lanterns inside, bad luck, and any leftover apples must be eaten before sunrise, or the banshee will be offended. Someone insists that if you sweep the floor counterclockwise after midnight, you'll have good luck all winter. You're not sure what you believe, but you do know you're not touching anything that's still dripping candle wax. Once the festivities fade and the last laugh echoes through the chilly halls, it's time to clear up the debris of another epic Halloween. But, as with every other part of the 1800s holiday, there's no such thing as just tidying up. Packing away Halloween decorations is a process steeped in superstition, old wives' tales, and more than a few dubious rules passed down through generations of anxious housekeepers. First to go are the vegetable lanterns, turnips, potatoes, and, if you were lucky this year, an actual pumpkin, all lined up on the windowsills with their lopsided faces and melting candles. By morning, they look less spooky and more like survivors of a long, hard night. Legend says it's terrible luck to let these lanterns linger indoors. The spirits they warded off need a clear path back to the night. So, you carry them outside, sometimes all the way to the garden's edge, where they can return to the earth. Anyone who tries to stash a withered turnip in the pantry for next year is swiftly and firmly overruled. No one wants a year of haunted porridge. Leftover apples are another minefield. The old folks claim every last apple must be eaten or shared before sunrise, lest the banshee take offense and bring a year of misfortune, or at the very least, a blight on the orchard. Children gleefully help out with this rule, pocketing apples for breakfast and using any truly battered specimens for an impromptu game of apple rolling. Just as long as every core finds its way outside, never in the bin. No one dares tempt fate when it comes to apples and the spirit world. The task of sweeping up is full of whispered advice. Some say to always sweep the dust and crumbs toward the hearth, to keep the warmth in. Others claim that counterclockwise sweeping after midnight will reverse the year's bad luck. There's even a heated debate over whether you should use the party broom or the Sunday broom, as each carries its own mysterious weight of household fortune. As for costume bits and decorations, everything must be inspected for stray pins, scraps of cabbage, or suspiciously sticky ribbons. Any leftover bits of turnip or cabbage are buried far from the house. Nobody wants their spring planting haunted by the ghost of last Halloween's prophecies. Paper masks are burned in the hearth, with a quiet wish for no more accidents next year. And soot-covered bedsheets are aired outside, where the night wind can chase away any lingering bad spirits. Throughout the process, every accidental slip or mishap is given ominous meaning. Break a plate? That's 7 weeks of guests. Drop a lantern? Best sleep with one eye open. Forget to snuff out a candle? Well, don't blame us if the pixies come knocking. Children and grown-ups alike treat every task with gentle solemnity, half laughing, half uneasy, because when it comes to Halloween, you can never be too careful. By the time the last item is packed away and the house has returned to its everyday disorder, there's a collective sigh of relief. The spirits have been honored, the omens heeded, and next year's luck, hopefully, preserved. All that's left is to crawl into bed, exhausted, and wonder if you missed any rules, or if the true magic of Halloween is that nobody ever quite gets it all right. So here you are, survivor of a truly haunted Halloween in the 1800s. You've weathered the turnip lanterns, the ghost stories, the fortune-telling cabbage, and the unpredictable parade of relatives in moth-eaten costumes. Maybe you bobbed for apples and only inhaled a little pond water. Maybe you managed to dodge the family séance, or at least didn't accidentally summon anything that required a broom and holy water. As you settle in under your actual clean blanket tonight, take a moment to appreciate the small mercies of modern life. Your bed doesn't scratch, your house isn't heated exclusively by the body heat of relatives and livestock, and if you want a snack, there's no need to hope someone left you a soul cake that hasn't been pre-nibbled by a mouse. The wildest thing you'll likely see in your bathroom tonight is your own reflection, not the legendary ghost of regrettable decisions past. Looking back, Halloween in the 1800s was less about jump scares and more about enduring a night filled with awkward parlor games, questionable cuisine, and the ever-present possibility that someone might mistake you for a witch if you know too much about herbs. People found